Good morning. My name is Dr. George Taylor, Chairperson, Department of Special Education at Coppin State University. I would have liked to have been here today, but I have a previous engagement that I must attend to. But I'm very excited because the topic I'm going to address is research. Think of research as the valley of despair. Now, I don't want to confuse you. I'm simply saying you need to know where you are and what you are doing. In order to be successful in this, you need a blueprint. I use a very simple illustration. And forgive me, gentlemen, but ladies, if you wanted to make a dress, you will need a blueprint. We are saying the same is true for research. You must have a blueprint. So I'm going to talk to you today about developing a blueprint for research. We know that research is systematic. It's based upon the scientific principle. We also know that this blueprint must be orderly, systematic, and controlled. So one of the first things I want to address to you is your interest in research, the topic that you wish to investigate. You must have a deep interest in it. You must also be aware of the research, conceptual frameworks, and some of the theories. One of the first things you need to do is develop a topic of research. This topic should be something of interest to you, something that you have a desire to achieve. Once you have done that, you need to read and read abundantly the current research. What's out there, who are some of the authorities, and what are some of their positions taken. And once you've done that, you need to develop it into a workable plan. I call it a blueprint for research, which will include major parts. The first major part is an introduction. What is the history, the trends, theoretical concepts involved in the particular program? You would also need a purpose. The purpose is based upon what you want to do and how you wish to achieve it. Then you will need a research question, or maybe several research questions, or hypothesis, which would designate the research in the way you wish to go. You would also need to define your terms, definition of terms, as they relate to your topic, definition of terms. And they should be documented. You simply cannot give a term without documentation. So keep that in mind, documentation. What is the need for the study, the justification? This also is based upon the research and what you've come up with. And we also need to be aware of the review of literature. What's out there? Who are some of the principal people? What are some of the key points? How do we go about the review? There are several things we can do. We can use computers. We can use the library. There's an excellent book I wish to recommend to you. It is called the Educational Index. What that does is list topics by categories. So you can find any type of topic you wish in the Education Index. It saves you the problem. When I did my dissertation centuries ago, I went into the racks and looked at periodicals. It took me time, and a lot of time. At that point, I had no knowledge of the value of the Education Index. I've also made several publications, and I've used the index very well. By that, for instance, one of the latest books I produced was Social Skills Development. I simply went to the Education Index, looked up the term social development, and found all these articles, which saved me tremendous time. I simply went directly to those authors in those articles. So that's good. Also, the review of literature tells you what other authors have done. It indicates the strategies, the methods, the purpose, procedures. In other words, a review of literature sort of guides you. You are not out here alone because you can follow other examples. You can replicate. You can see if a study done in California could be successfully done here. That's an example of that. Also, the review will tell you, for instance, the type of research used, the type of statistics used, and so forth and so on. one caution about the review of lit. Rather than writing at random, you need to organize the review of literature. For instance, you might have a section, advantages and disadvantages. Or you might be talking about middle grades, or you might be talking about senior grades. So you need sections in your review of literature. And remember, in the review of literature, you want current information. Now, we mentioned earlier about the theoretical background in Chapter 1. That's a lot of history. Textbooks come in very well in your introduction. But when you look at your review of literature, you want to make sure your work is current. You don't want things written centuries ago unless you have a historical research. And we can talk about the various types of research, too, that we employ. One of the principal types is descriptive statistics. And that's simple. Well, when I say simple, it's not simple. We develop a questionnaire and we send it out. An example might be you want to find out something about drug use of teenagers. You will develop a questionnaire and you send it out. And based upon the information you receive, you will simply analyze it. So descriptive research basically deals with present, what's out there, and what you wish to resolve. The other major type is experimental research, where you are manipulating. You have something you wish to do. For instance, you wanted to find out parental involvement in the schools. Then you will possibly teach some type of workshop, some type of conferences. You'll do a pre-post type of thing, find out what parents bring to the learning environment, you interview, and then you will find out postally what they're doing. So there are many ways, but the idea is that these are the two principal types of research that we use. And there are many other types. There are comparative research, correlational research, and all of these will take a lot of detailed explanation. And when you take the course EDUC 582, which is research method, all of these courses will be evident. So I won't bore you with going through all the various types of research. But what I'm saying to you, the review of literature is the basic, I hate to use the word, but I will, the Bible of research, because it directs you, it sets examples, and it tells you exactly what to do. So what I recommend is that even before you begin to develop Chapter 1, that you read and read abundantly. Find out what's out there, what are some of the current controversies, who are the authorities, and what they are doing. Once we've done the review of literature, the next part is methods and procedures. Methods and procedures. A lot of people call these avenues interventions. What are some interventions you're going to do? And one of the first things I strongly recommend is that you designate the type of research that you're going to use. I've given you an example of two types, descriptive and experimental. There are many, many other types. You also have to be aware of the two basic types. In other words, the two basic categories, qualitative and quantitative. Let me sort of give you a simple illustration of both. Qualitative are numerical data. You have numbers, whereas quantitative is words, and you can interview. Now you can do both types of research, but basically qualitative research is something recent. When I say recent, it came about like the early part of the 60s, because we thought that it was subjective. You remember Piaget and some of his work? He invented the interview schedule. He interviewed his own children. But for years, people considered that not important, subjective, too subjective. So a lot of people think that qualitative research is subjective. So keep that in mind as you move along. Now, you might want to look at both types of methods before you move on. The next part is the sample. Who are you going to choose? What criteria are you going to set up? Remember, samples should be equal. If you have a control group and an experimental group, you can't have a group of retarded children and a group of gifted children. They have to be the same. So the sample will also help you, and you will also see in review of literature how other authors have chosen their samples. The next is the instrument. This is very, very important because there could be many data sources. Instruments can be questionnaires, can be surveys, can be interviews, and a whole variety. But your instrument must be valid and reliable. And one of the things that a lot of students do, they make their own instruments. Well, the question might be, is this a reliable and a valid instrument? Again, that would take a whole semester to go through establishing validity and reliability. But let me say very briefly, if you use an instrument already developed, then reliability and validity have already been established. If you make your own, you might want to get expert opinion. And another way, you might want to do a pilot study to determine how well it is. But at any rate, you need to consider the instrument you're going to use. And the other part is the data analysis. How are you going to analyze the data? What type of statistics are you going to employ? Again, you should have had a course in statistics, and you should know how to do this. Now finally, you've gotten this blueprint, and your professor has approved it. The next step is to take it to the IRB, acronym for Institutional Review Board. They're the people who make the final decisions whether or not your study can be afforded. You may not start any aspect of your study until you've gotten approval from the IRB. Well, I suggest you talk to your chairperson and follow that mandate as your department indicated. So the interviews could be a questionnaire. But the Institution Review Board are very critical. And some of the major points we must consider is number one, the timing of the study. Number two, the instrumentation. Is it a reliable instrument? And number three, approval. You have to get approval to do it. For instance, if you're using kindergarten children, they can't sign permission, but parents have to sign. So the Institution Review Board is a very orderly, sequential, organized process. And you may not begin any study until they have approved it. So I recommend that you, if you have not taken EDUC 582, that you do it. And my name is Dr. Taylor. I'm in room 715 in the Grace Jacobs building. Even though I might not be on your committee, I'll be happy to give you an advice. My telephone number is 410-951-3357, and you can simply email me, gtaylor@coppin.edu. And again, thank you for your attention, and forgive me for not being present with you this morning, but I'm here to work with you and to serve you. Okay, thank you very much.